So ballooning, this is your history lesson now, actually began in 1783 in a town called Annonay in France. Back then everything was pretty much heated by fires. Okay? So think back to 1783 and a bunch of guys sitting around a campfire one night, messing around, right? Got a couple of brothers by the name of Montgolfier. The Montgolfier brothers were actually paper manufacturers by profession. And what they did, throw the cookies on the ground. What they did was they're sitting around the fire one night and they're throwing scraps of paper into the fire. And they noticed that occasionally the smoke would pick up a wisp of paper and carry it off into the sky. And I was like, look at that. That, couple of beers, a little wine, they come up with this idea. They say, what if we could harness that smoke and use it to carry man into the sky? Well, what they did was they made a little canopy out of their paper. We think they probably first time out used a rock, a stone, a board, something like that. Put it into this, filled up the canopy with smoke. It got tight, lifted up, carried it off into the sky. Then they got really adventuresome and they decided that they would use some farm animals. Now they did not pick on that lovely little colt that we had this morning, but they did put a chicken and a duck and a sheep.
Flying ducks.
Flying ducks, how about that? They put these poor hapless animals into a small basket. They made a bigger canopy. They filled it with thick black smoke from a fire. Now we know today that it's the heat, but the smoke actually was doing its job as well, because what the smoke was doing was the smoke was coating the inside of the canopy and making it less porous, so it actually held the heat longer. We still do that today, but we don't use smoke anymore. It's a clear coating, which is why the balloons stay nice and pretty. So anyhow, so what they did was they built this thing, they filled it with the smoke, they had the poor animals in there. It finally started tugging at the ropes that were tying it to the ground. It got hot, they slashed the ropes, and it went sailing off into the blue. And they flew. So this was our first known flight with the dog barking. Our first known flight with a four-legged animal. I gotta tell you, the chicken and the duck were not terribly impressed because they sort of knew how to fly already. But the sheep was kind of confused by the whole thing. It cooled off, it started back to earth, and as it's coming back to earth, the sheep could see over the side. So he started making all sorts of racket, which of course panicked the chicken. There you go. And the duck gets into the act. In the ensuing confusion, unfortunately, the sheep did step backwards onto the duck's leg, and he broke the duck's leg. That, sadly, was our first recorded quack up. Gotcha. And as a former Aflac agent, it was our first Aflac accident claim. Aflac. Okay. Anyway, sorry about the advertisement there. So, but they did live, all right? I'm told that there were rumors they had duck à l'orange for dinner. Not sure about that, but, you know, he had a broken leg, so what else were they going to do, right? Anyhow, the animals did successfully live through the flight. The men were emboldened by doing this, and they said, you know what? Ooh, he still flies. Good job.
In spite of the broken leg?
In spite of the broken leg. And they said, all right, let's try to do this with people. So they figured out that the bigger the canopy they built, the more weight it could carry. So now they went to the King of France and they said, we want to do this thing. And we think it's going to be really cool, but we need money and we need help. So the King of France said, yeah, I'm in on this deal. That'll work. So they get together and they build a huge canopy, and it's got beautiful designs all over it. You been to Las Vegas? Okay, outside of the Paris Pavilion in Las Vegas, they have a design that's very similar to that first one. I think it's blue and gold and all sorts of colors and everything. Anyhow, so you've got this big canopy that they built, another bigger basket. Now here's the fun part. The Montgolfier brothers were cowards. They did not want to fly in their own contraption. So they went to the King of France and they said, what if we take 2 prisoners and we put them in this thing and offer them their freedom if they live? Good idea, right? So the king says, well, all right, a little lost labor if they don't make it, but yeah, all right, whatever. So they went ahead, they got lots of volunteers, they got 2 prisoners, they go out, they go to the town square to do this thing. Now this is before CNN, before Twitter, no Facebook. 100,000 people showed up for this event. I don't know where they got 100,000 people from in 1783. but we know it to be a fact because our own Ben Franklin was actually there to observe this. So we have a good recorded entry of the whole thing. So 100,000 people have come to see this thing. And as they're all assembling, they've got this huge roaring fire. They're throwing all this stuff on the fire to make the smoke nice and thick and black because they still think it's the smoke. Michelin tires are great for that, by the way. Old cell phones, dead computer parts, all that makes the smoke really thick, okay? Just so you know. Anyhow, they get this all going. About that time, a gentleman by the name of Baron Pilat de Rosier comes onto the scene. Now, the Baron is a nobleman, the 1783 equivalent of our modern-day politicians, all right? We know what politicians are good for. Hang on, let me think on this a minute. They've got to be good for something. Okay, but what politicians do, and this is true to this day, politicians will come onto the scene. What they want to do is they want to find a problem that they can say is there so that they can solve it. So sure enough, the Baron goes up to the Montgolfier brothers and he looks at him and he says, "You guys have got a big problem." "What?" "Well, we can't let two criminals fly in this thing because they will be world famous if they live." I hadn't thought of that. So, well, we don't want to do this. Well, the Baron, of course, had his own solution. He says, "I, for the good of France, will volunteer to fly in your Montgolfier." So now he's named it after them in additional suck-up points, okay? And they said, "Ooh, we got a Baron, Montgolfier. We're liking this." So they said, sure. They took the prisoners out of the basket, the Baron and a friend of his, Spanish guy, the Marquis de Carne Asada. You've heard of him? Mm-hmm. Right, okay. Technically, if you look in a history book, it's going to say the Marquis d'Armand, but I'm sure it was Carne Asada, okay? Anyhow, the Baron and the Marquis ditch the criminals. They hop in the basket. Now, this is the other interesting thing about politicians, okay? And I hope none of you are in politics, but too bad if you are. Anyhow, politicians have this thing about engaging math before they necessarily engage brain. This was also true of our Baron, because what our Baron had just done was he'd just put himself in the position of flying in something that nobody had ever flown in before, and had no idea what to do with it. Doesn't this sound familiar? Oh, forget that. Okay. Anyhow, so what happens is they get in, they build this fire, it's tugging at the ropes, they're big, thick ropes. They got guys out here with machetes to slash the ropes as it starts tugging away, and they slash the ropes, and it goes sailing off into the sky. And it was a wonderful, glorious moment because man had flown for the first time. So this is really, really cool. However, it didn't take too long for the Baron and the Marquis to figure out that they had no control over this thing. Because unlike us today, they did not have a nice burner. They didn't have 4 tanks of fuel. They had a very hot envelope that started to cool. And about 14 miles later, oh, did I mention they weren't smart enough to go first thing in the morning? So this was late in the day, quite windy. They went 14 miles. Now, they did not also have a chase crew like we had today to drive right up and pick us up at our landing spot. So now we want to put our attention on the ground for a minute, and we want to think about 1783. You're a French farmer, and you are out there in your pasture. Unlike Christine today, who was out there with her camera and letting you in and being nice, the French farmer's out here, and he's kind of minding his own business. He looks up in the sky, he sees this big round thing, all sorts of designs all over it. He says, "What is this?" And then he starts noticing that it's belching black smoke from all corners, although it's round, all the seams, and there's 2 men in its clutches who are now screaming. What are you going to do? I see 2 choices, right? One's run the other way, that'd be me. But our Baron and our Marquis were lucky because our French farmer was very gallant. And being gallant, as a French farmer would be, he ran to their rescue with a pitchfork. Pitchforks are not good for balloons. I'm just going to say that, okay? So he ran to the rescue with a pitchfork. The balloon did not survive. The Baron and the Marquis survived, but the balloon unfortunately did not. Well, okay, it was a great party. I don't know. Ben didn't go on the chase. I don't know how they got back. Somehow they made it back. They had a big party that night. Everybody's celebrating. They're sitting around, a little more vino, more fire, more stuff, you know, and they're going, "This is great. We got to do this again." And the Montgolfier brothers are going, "Oh, this is great, but this is expensive. We can't afford to do this over and over again and build new balloons every time. What are we going to do?" Well, this is where the Baron actually came in handy. Being a nobleman, he had access to something that the average French peasant did not have in those days. The Baron had access to champagne. And it was his suggestion to say, what if when we fly, notice he's part of the club now, we carry champagne with us. And when we land, we'll offer it to the landowner. And they will not pitchfork our balloons. And that is how we came up with a really good excuse to drink champagne before 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So what happened was that word spread. It actually did get out there, and if you look into some of your history books, you will see drawings of some of the old balloons approaching ground, and they are literally lowering the bottle of champagne on a rope. The landowner would grab the bottle and run away, and they were left to land in peace. So that's how we came up with this tradition. Now, as you know, ballooning has been around the world. In fact, a guy just recently went around the world on a balloon. He just landed about 3 weeks ago. He's got a lot more guts than I've got. Remember I said the Baron's name was Pilote de Rosier? Let's think on this for a minute. What do they call me when I'm flying the balloon, besides the crazy grandma?
Pilot.
The pilot. Pilote. Pilot. Pilot. That's where we get our name to this day. The gentleman that just went around the world was flying what we call a Rosier balloon. Instead of being just hot air or just a gas balloon, it was a combination of the two. It was a giant envelope with a gas bubble in the top, a hot air cone underneath, kind of a hybrid. And we honor the Baron by naming it a Rosier. So those are some of the types of balloons that you know. Okay, so getting back to our little story here, they're going to have a toast. We've gotten balloons all around the world. They've flown literally on every continent. Think about that. That's kind of cold sounding. And eventually the Irish did get involved. And as we know, the Irish have a little blessing or saying for everything that they do. So the Irish got into it, and they added something. Well, now there have been a lot of flights since then. Thousands and thousands of balloon flights, hundreds of thousands of airplane flights, and sometimes there have been flights where people have been so grateful to get back that they've literally gone out and kissed the ground. Not necessarily what you want to do. We didn't have that kind of flight today. And by the way, those are usually fixed-wing people. They're not the hot air people, okay? we don't do it that way. But what we do is we kind of combine all of our little traditions together. So we're going to combine the drinking of the champagne with the saying of the Irish blessing that they wrote for us, with the kissing of the ground. Together.
How about yours?
Set your cup with their This guy's done it before you went to college.
Don't spill and don't laugh.
Woohoo!
Woo-hoo.
All right.